Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming out on this brisk Saturday morning. It could be worse. It could be snowing. It could be worse. We could have a gusty wind blowing through us, but we have a wind blowing through us, don't we? And that's a win for democracy. My name is Diane Proctor, and I am, as a member of Concord Indivisible and Reclaim Our Democracy steering committees, serving as the moderator for our event. Let us begin by hearing a welcome from Paul Langston Daly, who is the First Parish's Social Action Minister. Paul?
Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. Though our reason for being here is deeply unfortunate. We are here to remember January 6, 2020, when a group of armed insurrectionists, our fellow, 2021, yeah, right? 21. When a group of our fellow Americans attacked the heart of our democracy, attempting to stop the certification of votes. To that, I say never again. As members of First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church, we hold certain values at the core of our beliefs. We are a pluralistic faith with love at the center. We value diversity, interdependence, generosity, equity, justice, and transformation. We hold true what Heather Cox Richardson has reminded us in her letters to America. Democracy is a moral position. Defending the right of human beings to control their own lives is a moral position. Treating everyone equally before the law is a moral position. Insisting that everyone has a right to have a say in their government is a moral position. You all know that we are experiencing a right-wing insurgency, a move away from liberal democracy towards an authoritarian state that seeks power and control for the benefit of a small group. They have already come for access to abortion and medical care, the rules around concealed weapons, the rights of government to protect air, water, and earth, voting rights. Let's not be naive. They are coming for more. They have said they wish to return to 1789, when only wealthy, straight, white, cisgendered male property owners could make decisions, and the rest of us don't count. This is the world that some people are trying to build. This is the world that our children will inherit, unless we empower each other in revolt against hatred and abuse of power. The forces of fascism and authoritarianism will rise, and those forces will destroy everything we hold dear. Democracy is fragile and requires our care and commitment. As a person of faith, I believe we have a moral obligation to care and protect all, especially those who are most vulnerable. This is our task as humans in community, to care for each other, to work for justice, equity, and the transformation of ourselves and our society. It is our job to center love. Never again. Say it with me. Never again. May our work together make it so. Blessed be, and amen.
Let it be clear, democracy is not a partisan issue. It is neither the province of the Republican or Democratic parties. It is a universal human principle, and its healthy preservation is what brings us all here today. The heart of a vibrant democracy depends on a well-informed, educated electorate. Thus, when misinformation is broadly spread, reasonable discourse collapses. When 25% of Americans and the American electorate believe that the wrong president is sitting in the White House, we have a problem. When lies are promoted as truths, lies regularly repeated, the assurance of open, honest dialogue dissolves, and our democracy is imperiled. When the rule of law and its nuanced interpretations fails to recognize certain obvious truths, there was an insurrection in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. We watched it on our televisions. And it was not orchestrated by the FBI. I just want to say it was not orchestrated by the FBI. So when the law fails to recognize that obvious truth, we have work to do. Complacency is not an option. And to that end, there are folks among you circulating a letter for the entire Massachusetts congressional delegation, composed by Congress' own Paul Revere, Bob Nelson, who is sitting here on the stage. Let's give him a big round of applause. Can everybody see? Yay. Entitled Freedom or Fascism. You can read its contents. It's printed around here in various places. It's printed on the clipboards. And you can go to change.org, look for the QR codes, and sign your name. We want a robust list of citizens telling our Massachusetts delegation to get out and to act. We need courageous action, not silence, at every government level. And speaking of action, that is what the cast of remarkable speakers gathered here today have each embraced in their own personal and professional lives. They are here to help us consider what's at stake if we lose our democracy, because there is a lot that's at stake. Our first speaker is Deval Patrick, and he really needs no introduction, for he is a prominent political force in our Commonwealth. My husband and I have known Deval since he was a young, vibrant student at Milton Academy, and we have applauded and watched with respect and awe his meteoric rise to positions of state, national, and actually international prominence. He presently serves as the co-director of the Center for Public Leadership and a professor of practice at Harvard's Kennedy School. He's also a senior advisor to Bain Capital and former co-chair of the American Bridge 21st Century Foundation, a progressive political action committee. He has been a senior executive in 2 Fortune 500 companies, a partner in 2 Boston law firms, having graduated from Harvard as undergraduate and with a law degree, and by appointment of President Bill Clinton, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the United States Justice Department. He's a Rockefeller Fellow, a Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute, and the author of 2 books. And of course, from January 2007 to January 2015, Deval served as our governor of Massachusetts. Welcome, Governor Patrick.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, everybody. You good? Okay. Thank you all for being here this afternoon and for the warm welcome on a cold day. I'm really out of the speech-making business. I wanted to be here because you are here. Because you are showing up here and in communities all over the country to lay claim to our democracy. I want to bear witness to and be in community with people who understand that citizenship is an action, not just a concept. Like many of you, I am uneasy about American democracy today. I want to believe we'll be all right in the end. So I seize on all manner of encouraging news. I was encouraged by the midterm outcomes last cycle when so many election deniers and other cranks lost their bids for office. Many commentators at that time sounded ready to proclaim American democracy safe. I'm not ready for that. Because despite the election outcomes, not enough has changed. Listen to the former president and his promises of dictatorship on the very first day if he's reelected. Listen to the way so many in the media normalize his extreme statements, and so many of his party explain away his comments or their own election denials, embracing the same intrusive government overreach and the treatment of those who oppose them as somehow subhuman. If politics is about how democratic societies mediate their differences, there's still reason to worry deeply about the state of our politics and the state of our democracy. There has to be more to our politics than name-calling and one-upsmanship, breathless, fear-mongering emails, and raising as much money as possible for 30-second ads. Surely there is more to talk about in campaigns than outrage, as deeply as we ourselves may feel it. I still believe, despite all the reported division among Americans, that there are ties that bind, common understandings of and aspirations about what it means to be a citizen of the United States. And I want to explain why I start with this civic notion of citizenship, because if we want better policies and better politics, ultimately we have to challenge ourselves and each other to be better citizens. To see ourselves as members of community where each of us sees and accepts the stake we have in our neighbors' dreams and struggles as well as our own. In my view, herein lies the root of the troubles in American democracy. As I see it, we face two big challenges to our democracy today. The first is to make it function. How to make it straightforward, transparent, reliable, to register, stay registered, to cast a vote, and to have that vote counted. This first challenge is serious and has gained attention mainly because of the many states that have enacted laws to frustrate, complicate, and otherwise, when they want to, even overturn the vote. These measures are just the latest, in a way, of a whole series, a prolonged trend toward encumbering American democracy. Other measures include hyper-partisan gerrymandering, the widespread purging of registration rolls, the flood of money, much of it dark, into our policy making and into our politics, and the persistent and recently successful efforts to weaken the Voting Rights Act. Disinformation is another of the huge challenges that our democracy faces. The point is that for a long while now, we've been treating the functions of our democracy, as a friend of mine puts it, as if it would handle limitless abuse without breaking. Whether this is all part of a grand strategy or just a series of unfortunate coincidences, they add up to serious constraints on participation and representation that make our democracy weaker. So there is important work there to do. And maybe some of you have been doing it. But making our democracy function is not the only big challenge we face. The second big challenge is to make democracy matter. How to make the vote, indeed citizenship itself, meaningful. This challenge is even more insidious than the other, in my view, yet on this we hear hardly a word. Fully 1/3 of eligible Americans simply don't vote in presidential elections, even more skip state and local elections. Not just because it's harder to cast a ballot than it ought to be, but because they aren't convinced that it makes any difference at all. Unkept promises, inauthentic candidates and uninspiring campaigns, insurmountable odds, impenetrable political establishments, change that's slow to come. Add to that the prognosticators who keep telling us what the outcome of the election will be before a single vote is even cast. All of it serves to convince a lot of people, maybe some of you, that our civic duty to vote is a waste of valuable time. I understand that, but I cannot accept it, and neither can any of us, because there is too much at stake. I've told you before about growing up poor on the south side of Chicago. Even so, I got my chance to have an extraordinary career, to serve as a civil rights and business lawyer, as an executive in 2 Fortune 50 companies, as an investor and entrepreneur, a 2-term governor, thanks to many of you. Now students call me professor. My story, in many ways, perhaps like yours, is one of not being either defined or limited by my circumstances of birth. It's a story that has never been told often enough in this country. But once upon a time, it was told more often in this country than any other place on earth. That is an American story. But over the last few decades, that story is lived less and less often. Income and wealth inequality, economic immobility, wage stagnation, call it whatever you want. The American dream is a defining aspiration of American citizenship, and yet it is further and further out of reach for more and more Americans. It's not because of any decline in personal responsibility. I hear that explanation from time to time, but it's just not what I see. Grit, determination, family, hard work, mental discipline, ambition, luck, and grace, all of them played a role in my own story, as they do in everybody's American dream. Those qualities are in no less supply today than they were in the 1950s and 60s when I was coming up. My grandmother used to tell us, hope for the best and work for it. When it comes to hoping and working hard, people still do or try to do their part. But as a society, as citizens, we've stopped doing ours. Like I said, I had grit and determination, but I also had great teachers in my public schools. Teachers who were well prepared and who raised our expectations of ourselves. I had family support and encouragement. And my grandparents and mother worked hard to provide, but we also had housing we could afford and food assistance when we were hungry. I was diligent and disciplined, but I also had scholarships and college loans I could afford to pay back. I had ambition, but I also had an economy expanding out to make a place for me, not just up, and a bus and subway to get me to that job and home again reliably. Nobody wants government to solve every problem in everybody's life. I'm talking about government doing its part to help people help themselves. Government that invests the time, the ideas, and the money in the public schools, housing, transportation, healthcare, and similar public initiatives that are the foundation for private investment and personal ambition. I'm talking about government the way Barney Frank used to describe it, as the name we give to the things we choose to do together. When instead our leaders relentlessly focus on the next election or news cycle or the next poll, instead of the next generation or the needs of this one, when substance, integrity, duty, and honor seem always secondary to political performance art, small wonder that so many have lost confidence in democracy as a path to a better future. And here's where we come in, as citizens. Citizenship, as I said, is an act, a thing you do, not just a thing you are. Its privileges and responsibilities are interdependent, each one making the other possible and meaningful. So we ought to act like it. We ought to make our citizenship personal. Instead of letting our neighbors' dreams and struggles be a purely abstract concern, let's start by asking ourselves what we can do and do it. In spite of what too many political figures seem to want today, let's challenge ourselves to turn to each other instead of on each other, and hold ourselves and our office seekers accountable for that. I'm not talking about any one candidate or political party. No one person and no one party has a corner on all the best ideas. I'm talking about habits of mind and behavior, learning to listen, to paraphrase Robert Frost, without losing our temper or our self-confidence. Learning to see each other as more than one-dimensional cartoons that fit neatly into an oversimplified box. I start at this personal level because I think it might help us examine more critically what passes for political leadership nowadays. Think for just a minute about the litany of choices, so many of them false, that so many of our would-be leaders on the right and every once in a while on the left peddle for us today. We don't have to hate the other political party to be a member in good standing of our own. Amen. We don't have to hate business or the wealthy to work for social and economic justice, or to crash the economy to have a livable planet. We don't have to abuse the outcast and the vulnerable to secure the border, or to hate police to believe Black Lives Matter. We don't have to hate or hide our history to love our country. We have shown that and more in Massachusetts. Yes, we need laws, rules, and norms that make it easier to register, to remain registered, to vote, and to have that vote count. That's the least we can do to show our respect for participatory and representative democracy. But to address the challenge of making that vote meaningful, we as citizens need to do what you are doing today and to reclaim our voice. We need to push through the noise and our own discouragement and frustration to quit confusing cynicism and indifference for sophistication and act like citizens. Because only by acting like citizens, working together in the spirit of community, will we see and lift up leaders who are prepared to deliver the promise of democracy, which was and ought to be to leave things better for those who come behind. I'm not letting government off the hook. The people we elect have to deliver. We have tangible opportunities right now we have not seen in, I think, my lifetime, with resources through the American Rescue Plan, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, and other measures. Thank you, Joe Biden. Measures to develop and implement strategies that leverage private sector investment and expand opportunity for more people in places that have been missing out. I envy the governors and mayors in office right now with the kinds of options in front of them. That's why it's so critical to have public leaders in office right now who are in it to help us get our next job, not just help them keep theirs. Leaders who serve for the common good, not for the cameras and the Twitterverse or metaverse. But neither am I letting ourselves as citizens off the hook. Restoring meaning in our democracy requires us to talk to and listen to our neighbors, our friends, our co-workers, even that cranky uncle at Thanksgiving table, to model that we don't have to agree on everything before we work together on anything.
You said it!
That's not easy, I know. I think we've just lost the narrative, as the professionals say. We've forgotten how to speak to each other. But then here you are reminding us. Here you are on a cold day, remembering a day that will live in infamy, that reminds us how easy it would be to have self-government taken right away from us. For the sake of this generation and the next, let's not give it up without a fight. And part of that fight has to be, let's not settle for the same old candidates with the same old rhetoric and no action. Let's not settle for the same old rules supported blindly by the same old unjust habits. Let's not settle for hyper-selfishness as a substitute for community and an excuse for helping or not helping to meet our neighbors' basic needs. You once took a chance on that kind of leadership here in the Commonwealth. More than anything, you took a chance on your own aspirations. Let's do that again and revive a democracy worth saving. I'm glad to be with
We need to keep him on the podium, don't we? We need to get him out there speaking a lot and reminding us what really matters. Thank you so much, Deval. I jump around a little bit, get warm, do a little jogging in place, clap your hands up above, do things to stay warm. Our next speaker is Danielle Allen. She's a professor of public policy, politics, and ethics at Harvard University and a James Bryan Conant University professor, one of Harvard's highest honors. She came to those positions after earning a Phi Beta Kappa at Princeton in classics, a doctorate from King's College, Cambridge, that's the one across the pond, and a second doctorate in government from Harvard. After winning a MacArthur Genius Grant in 2001, she soon garnered an appointment as a professor of social science at the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton, and while chairing the Pulitzer Prize Committee and the Mellon Foundation Board of Trustees, she received the prestigious Klug Award from the Library of Congress, where she was recognized for her wisdom and influence in the study of the humanities and described as a national treasure. Her academic plaudits, therefore, are many, but we cherish our Danielle Allen, Massachusetts Danielle Allen, as a person who made history as the first Black woman ever to run for statewide office. As her recent opinion pieces in the Washington Post suggest, Danielle hopes to drive us toward a new social contract that serves and includes us all. The founder of Partners in Democracy, Danielle focuses energetically on cementing a genuine, honest partnership between citizens and their government. Welcome, Danielle.
Diane left off the most important thing, which is just friend of Diane Proctor. Thank you. It is such a pleasure and honor to be here with all of you, and I'm so grateful to Indivisible Concord for having for several years now put a marker on this day. You've asked us to come together and to reflect on the value of our democracy and the responsibility of all of us to it. National treasure. This, thanks to Kate Kavanaugh. Kate, can you wave your hand? Kate, who is leading the charge for ranked choice voting in the state, and I want everybody to come talk to Kate. If you don't know yet about how to make your vote matter, make your vote count, come talk to Kate, because ranked choice voting is a part of the answer. And it is an honor to follow after our most distinguished governor, Deval Patrick, another treasured friend, another national treasure. So grateful to be here. And I appreciate the big picture that the governor painted for us, because he's right about what we have to do to defend our democracy. But what I want to spend my few minutes on is to think about what it means to fight and how to fight and center love at the same time. How to fight with love. That's my theme for today. And you all know me. You know I tell stories. You know I come from people who have loved and fought for democracy for generations. A granddad who helped found one of the first NAACP chapters in northern Florida in the 40s. And that was when lynchings were on the rise. So that was real stuff. That was taking your life into your hands. On my mom's side, my great-grandparents fought for women's right to vote. My great-granddad was an early ally. He marched with the suffragettes on Boston Common in 1917. These were all people who were told something was impossible. African-American social equality in the South was impossible. Women having the right to vote was impossible. Their answer was no. No. Not only possible, but necessary. And the only question is how. And that's where we find ourselves now. The democracy that the governor painted for us, necessary. The only question is how. And so on that point, what matters above all, I believe, is how we fight. So I want to tell two stories that have taught me something about the nature of the fight. We know at one level that we're fighting extremists, but I want us to think really carefully about what that means. In 2015 and 2016, I spent the year among my hats. I'm a columnist for the Washington Post. I wrote an awful lot of columns, an awful lot, saying, I don't think we should elect Donald Trump. I just don't think it's a good idea. Taught me, it didn't make much difference writing columns for the Washington Post. But the other thing I learned was this. What I did get from writing all those columns was a heck of a lot of hate. Emails, phone calls, death threats, pictures of nooses, pictures of gas ovens. And it was affecting me. It was making it to the point where I didn't want to go outside because I was asking, who out there hates me? These anonymous things coming in, what is this? So I asked a friend of mine, somebody who was an expert in social media archaeology, to try to figure out where it was coming from. And I waited, and one day he came by my office, and he said, Danielle, I've got some news for you. Most of this stuff is coming from Northern and Eastern Europe. And I was like, hooray, B! I can love my fellow Americans again. And it was true. And that is not to say we don't have our own problems at home. We do. We have real extremists at home. We saw them on January 6th. We saw people who have accepted violence as their mode of politics. And that is unacceptable. Unacceptable. We have to rebuild the commitment to non-violence. But those people among us who are vulnerable to being radicalized, who are vulnerable to extremism, are also being stirred up by our most formidable adversaries, Russia, Iran, and China. And we have to understand that. So then what about those people among us, some of whom are genuinely extremists, and some of whom are only vulnerable to being extremists? We must engage with them with love. And when I learned that lesson back in 2015, 2016, I made a pledge to myself that I was not going to let anybody hold my dignity, my civility hostage. I was going to meet the negative with the positive. And the most extraordinary thing happened when I started doing that. I discovered most people were just fronting. They were just performing something, and that's not what they wanted. They didn't actually want the hateful. And I'm going to read you one email exchange to give you a sense of what I mean. And it's just one example, but at this point I have a lot of these examples. This was a message I got early November. I teach at Harvard. Subject line was Israel-Palestine. Okay, so you know the context. And I'll bleep out all the swears. What the has become of your pathetic institution? Your mind beeping our youth into supporting Hamas. You beep, 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 beep. Intellectual beep, beep at its finest. If the radicals gain the upper hand, you realize they'll be coming for you, ivory tower idiots, first, and me, as average middle-class white guy, won't save you, dumb beep, this time. Me back to him, and I'm going to make up the name. I'll give you a fake name. Dear Mr. Elliott, thank you for your kind note. I kid you not, that's what I say. I wonder if you've taken the time to read my own contributions on the subject. If not, you'll find them here, and I provided a link to one of my opinion pieces. Best wishes, Danielle. Message back. I don't care what your thoughts are. I will never allow my sons to go fight and possibly die for your upper-class sorry beeps. For one who is not a Trump psycho and who voted for Hillary and Joe, just so you know what real people are like. Dear Mr. Elliott, it seems that you don't care what I think, but are focused on my symbolic role. Is that right? Thanks, Danielle. Yes! What you represent, not you personally. A completely out-of-touch Harvard elitist who thinks the silent majority will stay silent indefinitely. I don't want a messed up future for my progeny. My progeny being the middle-class, average middle-class Jane Doe and John Doe who always pay the price most dearly for the poorly thought-out social engineering plans of the upper class. We pay in blood for those mistakes. I don't want my children or grandchildren paying in blood one day in the future for know-nothing intellectuals who encourage sleeping with the enemy. This is the most basic form of good and morally right versus bad and morally wrong, period. If a tenured Harvard professor can't understand this, then we're heading down a dark path. Your colleagues have promoted this gray area morality code for far too long, and now our young people are stuck in the fog of your making. a fog that will demand more from them than their young hearts can ever imagine. Dear Mr. Elliott, I'm glad I've understood you correctly. Thanks for letting me know. I am also so glad that in this last message, you've dropped the use of swears. I have to admit that I never really enjoy it when people swear at me. I really appreciate hearing your thoughts without swears in them. At any rate, I get that you see your children's lives being messed up by social engineering elites. I often complain about the problem of elite technocrats not paying any attention to how their grand ideas actually affect the lives people have the chance to lead. I do know that this is a problem of the place where I sit. I agree with you. In your message below, you wonder whether a tenured professor can understand the difference between right and wrong. What would you think of making a judgment about this tenured professor, the one you've written to, by reading the Washington Post column that I wrote about Israel and Gaza? Here it is. Put the link again. Thanks, Danielle. Danielle, I finally read your article. Thank you for sharing. It reaffirmed what I want to be, but often fall short of being, especially when dealing with such sensitive, emotionally charged issues. My apologies for the bad language. I honestly wrote it more as an attention grabber with the hopes of stirring up reaction, but never really anticipating a response. It was more like a cry of anger into a void, and I never expected to hear a reply, but only hoped someone might read it and think about how the silent majority of the country often feels, unheard and unrepresented. Also, as I heard more in-depth stories of what happened to these Jewish civilians, I identified so strongly with them, just as if it were my own wife or sister or daughter in that situation, and it brought out such a primal anger in me. Then to hear that our own institutions of higher learning were, in my opinion, indoctrinating our youth to think so one-sided on this issue, as opposed to teaching them critical thinking skills, it all just had me fed up and exasperated, honestly. But your calm and non-confrontational tone gave me pause. And I sincerely thank you for that. Also, thank you for just responding and doing so in a thoughtful way as opposed to a flat, robotic response. The interaction has been very good for me, and it will inform my future interactions in the future. Sincerely, kindest regards, Lenny. Fight with love, my friends. Fight with love.
Wow. Our next speaker is Rob Monroe. He's also my good friend. and the husband of an incredible woman, Sarah, and the father of two beautiful young girls. A PhD in history, Rob both teaches at Concord Academy and acts as the assistant head for academics and equity at Concord Academy. Rob also serves on Concord-based boards and committees, including Robbins House, the Concord Museum, as well as the town's DEI Commission. He presently serves as the vice chair of the Concord 250 Executive Committee. He is one busy man, a fantastic father, and a wonderful leader in our community.
It got colder. I'm a teacher, and I recognize that when students or people in the audience need to move around to stay warm, please do so. If you need to do some sprints, you need to jump around, whatever you got to do to stay warm. But thank you all for being here. It's an honor to share this space and this time with all of you. It is incredibly humbling to follow Governor Patrick and Professor Allen, and thank you guys for your amazing words, and Diane and Concord Individual for this invitation. I want to continue the theme of love and care, and perhaps more importantly, community that Professor Allen had shared, and share something more personal from my perspective here. So when Diane asked me to be here today, she said the prompt is, what's at stake if democracy fails? So here we go. When we think about capital D democracy, it's usually synonymous with other capital letter words: society, country, rights, law, politics. In this way, there's an abstract nature to the idea of what's at stake if democracy fails. And this is a dangerous and disorienting mindset to maintain, especially as I feel, see, and experience this dilemma at a local, personal, and very much lowercase d level. To me, the question of what's at stake if democracy fails boils down to the fundamental question, what's the difference between capital and lowercase democracy? At its heart, democracy to me is about how we articulate what our communities are. If capital D democracy gives voice, agency, and power to the people, we need to be very clear about whom we are speaking. Democracy fails when we think about who our country should not include. No doubt, I'm not the only one here who has heard whispers of this sentiment around Concord, unfortunately. Exclusion is felt acutely in those hard, national, global moments of conflict. And yet, it's so much easier for us at a local level to err on the side of abstract capital D democracy than ourselves and who we should consider members of our community. Exclusion has always been a lighter weapon to wield than inclusion, and therefore it has a far more violent capacity. And yet, I choose inclusion. We choose inclusion, despite its complications, complexities, and clamor. It's in the spirit that I share who my community is, and therefore whose humanness is at stake should democracy fail. The list includes, it's not exhaustive, but it includes my beautiful partner, my two wonderful, very complicated biracial girls, their friends, their families, who speak myriad languages and observe more traditions and religions I knew existed, my friends who are proudly Zionist, my friends who are unequivocally anti-Zionist, my gun-loving sibling, and my rifle-competing relative. My colleagues, my students, my twice exceptional and differently abled loved ones. My 84-year-old, stronger than a freight train mother. And every single soul at the Best Western. So, for me, the difference between capital and lowercase democracy is actual people. What's at stake if democracy fails? People, us. Our lives, our identities, and the ability to love and to be loved is at stake. Folks will hear this as an overly personal testimony, and make no mistake, it very much is. Democracy is personal and messy and complicated and difficult. It was always designed to be. When we think in these terms, I challenge any of us to recall how diverse and expansive our small communities are. Our lowercase democracies thrive when our diversity sits in tension, grows through dialogue and experience, and sometimes does not make sense. That's what's at stake. I'm interested in where we, as Concord, a lowercase democracy community with a history of influence in capital D democracy, can welcome, support, and honor all personhood into our community membership. To answer the question, what's at stake if democracy fails? Everything and everyone. Once it fails at the lowercase level, we ain't got a chance at salvaging it at the uppercase level. So, at the heart of all this is kindness, care, and truth. Be kind to all members of our democratic community, care for their humanity, and learn how to support it, and perhaps above all, learn, listen, and do the hard, messy work of understanding truth. We can do this. We have to do this. Good luck.
Wow. Another wow. Representative Carmen Gentile of Sudbury is our next speaker. He has represented the 13th Middlesex District for the past 9 years and now represents precincts 3 and 4 of Concord, along with the Sudbury and precincts in Lincoln, Marlborough, and Wayland. Is that creative gerrymandering? I'm not sure, but it looks really strange on a map. He currently serves as chair of the Sudbury Housing Trust, as a member of the Council on Aging, and vice chair of the Sudbury Democratic Town Committee. Carmen is a lead sponsor in the Massachusetts House of resolutions to end Citizens United. Money, dark money, is a problem, and Carmen understands that better than almost anyone I know. Welcome, Carmen.
Well, thank you very much, Diane, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. It's not a pleasant topic, but it's a necessary one. Democracy is a wonderful form of government. It allows we, the people, freedom to make choices so long as those choices do not harm others. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, our right to peaceably assemble as we have here today. All our rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution enable each of us to enjoy our lives to the fullest extent possible. Next year, we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the birth of our democracy and escape from the King George's tyranny. That celebration would be bittersweet if our November elections install authoritarian insurrectionists and those who gave aid and comfort to the rabid horde that attacked our nation's capital 3 years ago today. The sad truth is that there are more than 20 million people in the United States who would use violence to overthrow our democracy, and a similar number who would support them to tear asunder the rule of law, cast aside our legitimate election results, and install a corrupt, self-serving authoritarian regime. This is a dangerous time in our nation's history. If we love liberty and freedom, each of us must do all that we can to elect candidates whose oaths to support the Constitution of the United States are heartfelt and sincere, oaths that our Governor Deval Patrick took, Simon Cataldo took, and every state and official here took, and town official as well. This is a danger. If, as, and when these insurrectionists rise up again, as they did 3 years ago, we need to stand up against them and put them down as the heroic and vastly outnumbered Capitol and Metropolitan Police did 3 years ago, with 150 officers injured and 7 deaths related to the attack. Our country has faced challenges from beyond our borders and within over the past 2.5 centuries and risen successfully to the challenges each time. The War of 1812 saw the White House set ablaze, but its 4-foot-thick granite walls stood firm. 163 years ago, states that had not yet renounced slavery sought secession, and more American lives were lost than in all our wars before or since. Authoritarian regimes in Japan, Germany, Italy fought us and other democracies in World War II. Senator Joseph McCarthy's lies and corrupt claims of patriotism eviscerated the civil rights of many Americans in the 1950s, before the American people finally woke up and recognized the cancerous fraud that he was. Today, we face the greatest danger to our democracy since our revolution was born here in Concord and Lexington 249 years ago. That danger is not from beyond our borders, but from within. We're assembled here today to go forward, today, tomorrow, and every day hereafter, working together to uphold the rule of law, uphold our right to vote, uphold the results of our free elections, and stand firm against those who would cast our Constitution aside and lead us to destruction. And God bless our Constitution, God bless freedom, and God bless democracy in these United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, for reminding us of that day in such vivid and appropriate prose. Our cleanup speaker, as it were, is Simon Cataldo. Simon serves our community in Concord here as a state representative as well for the 14th District. He was proudly raised in West Concord and lives in Concord with his wife Chessie and their 3 boys. A busy man, Simon graduated magna cum laude from Colorado College and was chosen the managing editor of the University of Virginia Law Review when earning his JD. As a former middle school special math teacher, he founded a national nonprofit for at-risk youth called Harlem Lacrosse, and as a lawyer, he served in the U.S. Justice Department as an active and productive public corruption prosecutor, both during the Obama and Trump administrations. He brings a wealth of political, the gloves won't let me turn my page. But I'm sure it's going to work any second. And my husband kept saying, have you practiced this? Have you practiced this? And I said, oh, no problem. I practice it with my gloves, and sorry, Ellen, and without them. So let's see. And he brings a wealth of distinguished political experience to his role. We are so grateful for his engagement. So we welcome Simon Cataldo to the stage.
I want you to know that when he sat down after giving his remarks, Governor Patrick leaned over to me and whispered, "Do you want my gloves?" I said no. That was a mistake. If you smile, you will feel warmer. 1 year and 1 day ago, I stood on these steps before you about 72 hours after having been sworn in as your new state representative. I delivered to you a message of hope for my children and yours, for your grandchildren, that they would grow up in a society that champions self-determination, pluralism, individual liberty, and small d democratic initiatives. How good it was to be young and optimistic in early 2023. I spoke to you about the time that, as a new trial attorney at the Department of Justice, I had prosecuted Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio for criminal contempt. How we had won at trial, and how, although Donald Trump made Arpaio his very first of what would become many presidential pardons, the U.S. Justice Department and the voters had won the larger victory for the rule of law. I talked about, and I remembered how important that activism was, that looked to the future. Today, when I think about the rule of law, I'm reminded of John Adams. Do you know how John Adams became famous? He chose to represent British soldiers who had shot and killed protesters in Boston, the most unpopular people in this area. He chose to do that because he believed so profoundly in the potential of the nascent American experiment and in the rule of law that he was willing to risk everything professionally, personally, and reputationally to ensure that these people had a legal defense. And not long after that, with the American experiment on the precipice of failure before we even had a constitution, he reached across the aisle to leaders of the southern colonies, people, mind you, whose views about values and the rule of law could not be more inimical to what we hold to be true as Americans today. He did this not... The bell tolls for them. He did this not because he saw merit in their positions, but because he believed in the future potential for American democracy but because he believed in future generations of Americans, one of which was his son who would one day be president of these United States. Those future Americans who would make more perfect a profoundly imperfect union. My friends, we can do this again. In the Massachusetts legislature, I work with dozens of Republicans. And I'm going to admit to you something that could get me fired from my job. I like them. In fact, I filed a bill this session with Rep. Sean Garbely of Arlington. Anyone from Arlington here? Yeah, all right, here we go. It's on pay for people who work with those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. If this issue touches your life, you know that it's a real challenge in our communities all across Massachusetts. Over a third of the Republican House delegation has co-sponsored that bill, including the minority leader. They too are responsible for their constituents, and they too love our country. They do. So, if we're going to win this battle for the heart and soul of America, and that's what I'm interested in, by the way, is winning, then we must be more like John Adams. You, and I know you, the grassroots activists who soon will be deployed to Michigan, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, and Maine, you must engage in your outreach not out of antipathy for any person or policy or former president, but out of love for our great nation, out of trust in the people who cannot step up today, but one day will, if given the chance. That is what I want for my children, a chance. So, go out. Use your skills, your voices, your networks, your talents, and yes, spend your money. Go out and knock on doors. Make postcards. Make phone calls. Engage in hard conversations. I'm asking you to do all of these things out of love for our great nation. I know that you know what to do because I know you. I know you. And you, my friends, are the balm for this great nation's soul. Thank you so much.
Clearly, one theme has permeated each of our speakers, and that is from Paul's original words of welcome to Simon's conclusion, which is the importance of love, the importance of listening, the importance of embracing those with whom we agree and those with whom we perhaps disagree. As we hear about revenge politics and the statement, "I will be a dictator, only for one day," our collective anxiety must mount. The finest cure for anxiety, however, is action. And there are 3 actions that you can do immediately following this event. 1, join Concord Indivisible, and follow our many activities to do the things in which we can engage in a really healthful way. Number 2, join the First Parish Reclaim Our Democracy Committee and attend Zoom meeting at 8 o'clock this Wednesday, held by David Pepper. Now, if you don't know David Pepper, he is the Ohio Oracle, who has unmasked the treachery of disinformation and all sorts of other problems brilliantly. Speak about what actions local organizations can embrace. That's a Zoom meeting this Wednesday at 8 o'clock. And you can find the connection to that by going to the website of the First Parish. And then sign a letter to our congressional delegation, penned by the remarkable Robert Nesson. And he is remarkable, incidentally, that he's out here in this freezing cold, is a testimony to his willingness to be with us through all of this. And join the standout on Monument Square that follows this rally. We can walk right across over there, and we can keep getting all those wonderful honks we're getting from people as they go by, wave our signs, and just talk to each other about what this kind of day meant to us. As John Lewis charged, speak up, speak out, get in the way, get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and help redeem the soul of America. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great day.